Hello, my name is Atwood with A1 Custom Car Care. I think this is going to be our fourth podcast that I kind of put together, just a little brief backstory on me and why it is that we do this. I have been with A1 Custom for a little over 20 years, maybe getting close to 22, 23 years, somewhere in there. I've been professionally in the business for probably close to 25 years, and I feel like it's really important to share some of those experiences, mainly some of the school of hard knocks that I've learned over the years, as well as what's going on in the automotive industry today in 2025. So we're finally shifting into spring here, if you will. The weather here in Southwest Missouri has been up and down as it always is. So I have 4 seasons in 1 week, or sometimes 2 or 3 in a day, if you will. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know about you guys out there, but winter's fine, but I'm sure glad to get out of it and be moving, into where the days are longer and get some things done. And really, as the seasons change, you find different things going on with your vehicle. Like typically AC season is coming up, and that's where maybe your AC system hasn't been working for several months for a variety of reasons. But now all of a sudden we get a 70, 80 degree day and you figure out, hey, it's not working and I got to get that fixed. So, I've been doing air conditioning work for decades at this point. I have my 609 certification, which is what you have to be able to handle refrigerant. Many of our team have those, so that's not really a big thing. But in order to handle refrigerant professionally, you have to have it. So I've been ASE certified in air conditioning, heating and air for several decades at this point. And I've had a theme kind of over the last several years. A lot of folks see me in uniform, or they know me personally, or maybe you have my direct contact. And back in the day, I feel like it was a lot, I don't want to say simpler, because they had their challenges at that point as well, but there was more pattern failures or less complex machines. And so a lot of times if you talk to the right person, they could give you an answer. Hey, my goodness, this is what you need to put on it, or the part that's bad, or what you need to check. And, I've been part of a radio station and radio show for several years. Some of you may find me from that. And I really kind of came at it from a different point of view, if you will. I want to be the guy that can test and get to the bottom of the root cause of the problem with your vehicle versus just chucking parts at it. Now, I've worked with a lot of guys or met a lot of people over the years that are really good at guessing, and they're pretty accurate a lot of times. The problem when it goes off the rails is when they guess and they're wrong. They don't have any experience on what to do about that. And I'm going to share a couple stories with you guys today just of why I come at the business like that. And there's also some videos here on the channel that I'll kind of refer to. So if you want to go back and find those, I'll try and do my best to make it clear of what to look for. But long story short, a lot of folks still think that even though I'm lots of experience, lots of years and decades of knowledge here in the automotive field, I don't really fill my brain with pattern failures. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some out there that you either, because of so many you've seen, and that's okay. Fixing cars off of experience is a viable and important part of the automotive repair business. However, I don't want to be the guy that just chucks parts at it, and then when it's wrong, I don't know what to do after that. I've actually worked and apprenticed under some of those people I'm talking about early on in my career, and it drove me crazy. I have always had to understand why we were replacing that part, and that's really where I come from. Whether I'm the one taking care of your car or one of our other many technicians or mechanics at this point in time. Some guys get bent out of shape about being called a mechanic. It doesn't bother me. Mechanic, technician, as long as your car's fixed at the end of the deal, I feel like I've done my job, and you can call me whatever you want at that point. So what I mean by that is I can't help but understand why the part failed. Now, if it's just a failed part that it's worn smooth out, okay, I can take that all day long. But a lot of times the parts are taken out prematurely for a myriad of reasons. It could be lack of maintenance. It could be a inferior design quality, which I think we've seen, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But that's what I'm looking for. Not only do I want to figure out what the cause is, but I want to know why it happened. And maybe there's something I can do about it, and maybe there's not. I don't know. But I'll give you some examples of that right now. There are actually, one of our policies in our company at A1 Custom Car Care is the fact that if fluid touches it, we will service the fluid of the damaged part. So for example, say you come in and you have a failed water pump. That's a pretty easy one, pretty common repair. I literally have cars in this parking lot now of some of our technicians that have well over 300,000 miles on those cars with the same water pump on them, the same radiator in them, the same thermostat in them. That didn't happen by accident. It's not just, oh, hey, you got a good one and I got a lemon. It happened because those technicians have serviced those vehicles over the years. Now, do we have failed parts? Yes. But my point being is if the fluid is taken care of, the parts will last so much longer. And so if you come into one of our stores and you have a failed component that fluid touches it, not only are we going to ID the component, but we're going to try and track down what happened. And 9 out of 10 times, it's because the maintenance had never been done. You've got 150 to 200,000 miles on it, and you're racking pinions out. Your rear differential's got a bearing making noise in it. Maybe the transmission broke on it at 60 to 120. I'm seeing more transmission concerns come into our shops than I have my entire 20-plus year career. Now, I don't mean that I don't want transmission work. I do, and we're very good at fixing it. I'll be honest, I got into the transmission business because I would send cars to the quote-unquote transmission shops, and they couldn't diagnose them. Every one that went over there, it got a transmission. It got a transmission. A good friend of mine, I actually referred him to a transmission shop. A little bit of water in my beard there, so I guess we'll see how that comes out in the podcast here. I sent him to a big transmission shop around here that I have been referring to them for years. And I felt like they could diagnose what was going on with his truck, so he maybe didn't need a transmission. Well, long story short, went over there. They didn't really test anything. They told him he needed a transmission. Well, I knew enough backstory on it, and I can get into that if you want, but it had been at another shop, and essentially the transmission concern was created during another repair. It was a Duramax diesel truck. It was at another shop because at that point in time, I wasn't really doing Duramax work. I do quite a bit of it now. But it was there getting a rear main seal put in it, and when it came out of the shop, when it went in, it had all the gears, but when it came out, I think it only had like second or third gear. So naturally he calls me, he says, hey, I know that's not really your thing. And so I say, hey, go to XYZ shop. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. See what they say. Because if it went in driving fine and it came out, something probably happened. And this is going back several years. I do a lot of transmission work now. I do a lot of diesel work now. It just kind of was because I didn't have anybody else I could refer with confidence. And I booked those by appointment, by the way. So if you call one of my stores and they say, hey, what about this? They may or may not refer you to the location that I'm at most of the time. Or they may tell you, hey, we need to make a phone call and see if that's something that we are going to get in the middle of. They're getting a hold of me. So if you call one of the stores and they're like, hey, we don't do that, really a lot of that is still stuff that I do. I do have a nice office. I actually have 2 offices here at A1 Custom, and I don't spend a ton of time here. Now I'm having to spend more time here as my role has changed, but I got in this business to work on cars. But I need to get back to my story. So long story short, he calls me. He says, hey, they want like $8,000 or $9,000 to put a transmission in there. What do you think? And I said, look, this may be a big waste of time and a big pain in the butt, but let me have the truck. And so I was able, he went and towed it, got it to me. I did some tests and figured out that there was a stuck spool valve or valve, and maybe I got the wrong terminology wrong there. So if you're a transmission guy out there, correct me. But the valve that ran part of the body for some of the shift sequence in that Allison 1000 transmission, it was stuck. And so I'm assuming what happened is maybe there was air in the system or somehow the line pressure. And that was the other thing. When I checked the line pressure on this one, it was maxed to the hilt. Now, to put a rear main seal in an Duramax, you got to take the transmission out or take the engine out. In this instance, I could see from the marks on the pan that were pretty fresh that they had taken the transmission out. So something that rammed the line pressure to the moon, and it stuck that valve. And maybe I could have disassembled that valve body, but again, at this point, I was pretty early in the transmission world. I was able to find a solution or a problem solver valve body. I think Sonex is who I ended up getting that from. And so I pulled it out. I pulled the valve body out. I didn't have to take the transmission out. I put a valve body in it. It was a reasonable amount of money. It wasn't a terrible, very expensive. And that is going on probably over 5 years ago. And I actually just seen him the other day. I asked him about the truck. I did some engine work on it for him, some fuel lines that are notorious for drying up and leaking. I can't remember what else I did on that truck. But long story short, he kind of verified for me that the truck's running great. So not only did we not spend, 8, 9, 10 grand, whatever a transmission on I think it's an 04 Duramax, whatever that would have cost him, would that have fixed it? Yeah. Is that what he needed? No. And so I share that story with you because I have a lot of people asking for, hey, my car's doing this or XYZ, what's wrong with it? Or they're throwing all kinds of parts at it that are not fixing it. And that is really wasting a lot of money. And when we decided to start doing the radio show that I had done for a decade, and when we kind of shifted gears into doing the podcast situation, which is what you're, hanging out with me now, which I greatly appreciate that. If you do stumble onto the podcast, by the way, I know every YouTuber and podcaster out there talks about this. It really helps to make sure that more people see it if you will like, subscribe, and if you have some insights, comment on the podcast. And a lot of times that's things that we'll talk about. So I want to do this podcast, and what we've always tried to do is an educational piece out there. If I'm not getting better every single day as an auto mechanic, I am getting way behind in the industry. I've shared a little bit with you guys that my dad was a dealership auto body guy for a big part of my life, and I got to see what went on, kind of vicariously or being around the dealership. And I can remember when I was a child when carburetors kind of went away, and I'm dating myself a little bit. Fuel injection just kind of started hitting as mainstream. A lot of mechanics that were really good at carburetors, which I'm still trying to learn, to be honest with you guys, they said, this ain't never going to work, or I've put in my time and they got out of it. And so those rare old school skills are dying very quickly, and people are retiring, and the carburetor guys are almost gone. So I share that was a really pivotal point in the industry. Next, you got distributorless ignition, and you got, instead of TBI or throttle body injection, which was typically 2 fuel injectors feeding 4, 6, or 8 cylinders, you went to multi-port. So however many cylinders you had, you got a fuel injector for each one of those. And then that was OBD1, which is what they called that, onboard diagnostics, the first initial stage of that. So at that point, even more guys got out of the industry. I know one guy that literally stood up at a dealership and said, distributorless ignition will never work and never be on cars. I'm going to share a secret with you guys. He was very wrong, because we work on them all day. And most of you out there, you're driving one of those vehicles now, and you don't even know it, or maybe you do know it. So every time there's these giant leaps in technology, and it's getting more and more rapid every single day as we sit here and talk. I'm keeping up. I've got my other monitor over here on more training and current events that's going on in the industry, so our staff as a company can, essentially keep up, and we're not learning on the job. That I It's not saying I don't ever do that, but I as an A1 Custom Car Care, or as we as a company, and really I am a product of training. I continue my education even many, many years into this. And honestly, when I get into my 50s and 60s, I'm probably still going to be doing training. As a matter of fact, I was at home with my wife and my little girl. Our older kids are all out doing their own thing. It's not like they weren't around, but they're in college and high school and baseball and all that stuff. I logged on to a training. It came on at 7 o'clock last night. It was about 9:30 before I was off of that training. And I just share that with you to let you know that the industry is changing that rapidly, that whoever is providing your service, they need to be a part of some kind of ongoing learning system. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad experience. And that's really kind of why I share the transmission story with you. That's really why A1 Custom got into the alignment business years ago. We were an undercar shop for decades. And what that means is we did exhaust, we would do your brakes, might put some shocks on there. And I was hired on at the point that the company was going into full service automotive repair. So from doing kind of basic routine stuff, the industry was changing. Thank goodness the folks at the wheel, if you will, saw that coming. And so, 20 plus years ago at this point, we really didn't even do oil changes back then. Now we do full service automotive repair. I'm one of, I think, 10 to 12 master certified technicians throughout our company. And that's actually a really high number for how many locations we have. So like here, as I'm sitting here thinking about, I'm at our Sunshine and Fort location, including me, there's probably 4 or 5 of us here. I'd have to check and see who's current. That's a lot of master certified technicians at one location. Most shops out there will have one master, and he's kind of the shop foreman. So it's really nice to be a part of, a team, if you will, that we can all pull from that experience, and we're not just trying to figure this out as we go. So with all that being said, that leads to your service experience. And not learning on the job or not have been trained on some of this new technology that's out here really gives you a either good experience or a bad experience. Now, I want to talk about value while we're talking about good or bad, because I'm seeing a lot of folks right now. One of the guys that I actually study with outside of the automotive field, because it's not just automotive study that I feel like is important. He's a guy out of California. He does a great job talking about economics. Now, I have so much to learn, and I'm not going to school you on anything. I'm not a financial advisor, whatever. But I don't think you need to be a financial advisor to see that the dollar is not getting you as much as it did even 5 to 10 years ago. So it's taking more dollars to buy either the same or less goods than it did, say 5 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago. We would do services then, and I was estimating and selling service a lot at that point, as well as doing a lot of the repairs. And so I remember what those prices were, and I still have folks come in expecting those prices. And God knows I would love to give you those prices that we had 5 and 10 years ago. It's amazing to me to see what the cost of a good quality automotive repair is versus what I remember. And I get it from your side of it. I do a lot of repair work on my vehicles, my kids' vehicles, etc., that I'm footing the whole bill on and doing the labor part of it. So your time is not free. I don't care if you're a mason, auto mechanic, a lawyer, whatever. Your time is, and the older I get, the more I understand that time is that thing that you just can't put a price on. Well, I guess you can, because you go to work for somebody every day for X amount of dollars for X amount of time. But what I figured out that there is a value to that time to dollar exchange. And so even if I'm doing my own work that I'm not having to pay somebody else to do, that's life and time that you and I are never going to get back. So that doesn't mean that it's free. But for instance, probably 5 years ago, you could have done a window regulator in about most vehicles for say $200 to $300, maybe $400 if you've got a higher end vehicle. The quality of the aftermarket has gone terribly downhill, as well as the cost of the aftermarket has gone sky high. And then you attach an OE or a original equipment part price to that, that window regulator job may be $400 to $800 now. I bring that up because the one on my wife's vehicle has been giving us fits, and that's going to be my chore for the weekend. I'll probably shoot a video on it if I have time, pulling her door panel, putting a new motor and regulator assembly in it to make sure her car is in good shape. I really take it very personal that, the old adage, the roofer's roof leaks, the mechanic's car doesn't work, etc. I just don't see that being acceptable. It's one thing for me to break down, but for my wife or kids or any of our close customers or clients, I take that super seriously. So if I know that an aftermarket part is not going to be a good solution, OE is the right solution because of the reps and sets that we've done forever. Unfortunately, you're going to have to buy once, cry once in order to get good value out of that. So what I was talking about the economic part of it is the days of the cheap repair and the somewhat cheap labor are gone, because the workforce for 20 years, even as I was growing up, like, if you didn't go to college, you weren't going to be successful in life. If you were a tradesman or a tradeswoman, you weren't going to be successful in life. You were going to have a barren existence, and they were wrong. We are constantly recruiting, building, and trying to attract folks with high level and high skill in a skilled trade. It's not as easy as it was when I was a kid. Everybody was a mechanic back then, and a lot of folks, did good work, but if you didn't like it, quote unquote, toolboxes have wheels, they'd kick you to the curb instead of trying to work or grow you. And I just really never understood that, but they were able to get away with it for so many years that a lot of the folks that maybe still own shops now, they just can't fathom that the generation that has come after the baby boomers, they will not put up with that. And so as we shift right now, going kind of back to some of the technology that's changing, some of the generational sets that are changing, you're going to have to conduct yourself in a much better manner. And as far as who is working on whatever it is, whether you're having contractors come in and work on your home, whether you're going in for medical treatment, or whether you're choosing an automotive repair shop, that matters. And the value of that is really important. So I had several this week where I either got text messages or phone calls of, hey, this is what I see, this is what my car's doing, what is it? Well, I'd love to just tell you what it is, but the most valuable thing that I can do for you, or whoever your trusted automotive shop is, if you have a shop that you have a good relationship with, hopefully our podcast validates that you're in the right place. If it doesn't, and you keep hopping from shop to shop to shop to shop, you need to take some of what we're talking about into consideration. And what I mean by that is the communication is important on both sides of that. A, you need to know who's working on your vehicle. It doesn't mean you stand out in the shop. We just went through some insurance education on my part. The insurance game is as important and big as ever. We will bring a customer out in the shop and escort them and say, hey, this is what's going on with your car. This is what we'd like to do for it. This is our recommendations. And then you can give us from there. We're not holding you hostage. But being correct is the biggest and most valuable thing that I can do for you every day. And when I say I, it's I as in A1 Custom, because this place is a whole bunch bigger than Dustin Atwood. But you are a mirror of your peers. And I'm really proud to reflect some of what we're talking about here from the folks that I get to work with every single day. So what that means to you is good information as a customer to the service advisor, good repair history, maybe even a video sometimes of what's going on with your car, and then articulating that really well and being intentional with that so you get the best outcome possible. I've shared this before, and I'm not going to beat it into the ground, but I had a guy early in my career look me square in the eye as I was trying to say, hey, okay, you've got this issue. What's it going on? What's the conditions? Help me make sure that I'm right. He looked me square in the eye and he said, I went to college so people like you could fix my vehicle for me or do work for me or figure it out. I don't know exactly how he said it, but I'll never forget the first part of that. Well, the more I have to investigate, the more time and expense that costs. And typically the outcome or the result of the repair isn't as good as it could have been had you as a customer done a really good job articulating what was going on and what your concern was. And I'll give you an example. Had a guy a couple of years ago. I had told him his motor mounts were trash like a year back. And I mean, basically when you go to take off in his pickup, you felt the engine lift up on the driver's side and bam! And then when you would let out of the throttle, you'd hear or feel the engine, boom, set back down. So I'm like, hey, we need to do this. He's like, I don't have the money. I said, I get that, but every time that flexes, it's hard on the hoses, it's hard on the plastic necks of the radiator, thermostat housing, etc. It's hard on the wiring harness. You take a piece of wire, there's only so many times that you're going to be able to bend this wire back and forth, even in the installation, before it breaks. So bad motor mounts, bad training mounts lead to costing you more money and heartache down the road. So it's about a year later, he gets a hold of me and says, hey, I want to put those mounts in. I'm like, great. Put the mounts in there. I didn't ask any questions. Maybe I should have. I fixed the absolutely broken mounts. I take video of it. I do the whole thing. I send it to him like on Monday or Tuesday, early the next week. He's like, hey, it's still making that noise. I'm like, there's no way it's making that noise. He's like, I wasn't denying it. I mean, I guess I was, but I'm like, the mounts were broke off. I put brand new GM mounts on there. I know I fixed that guy's truck. I'm like, come on by, let me hear the noise you're hearing. And I don't have anything here in my office, but basically he was fine with the motor, bam, bam, every time that but in that year's time, there was a little piece of metal that started going, and I make bad sound effects, but it had a very tinny sound to it. And that is what he wanted fixed. Now, was he upset with me about the mounts? No. He knew it needed the mounts. He was glad to have them done. But I should have clarified, or I wish he'd have said, hey, it's making a new noise, not the banging around of the engine. It's one of those things that communication at the root of everything. When I have an issue that maybe we don't get something right with a customer or we don't diagnose it right out of the gate, it always goes back down to the communication side of the world. And so, long and short, I'm trying to share with you guys as we come up. I try and keep these about a half hour. I'm trying to share with you guys valuable lessons that, A, hopefully help and increase your experience at whoever does your automotive repair, as well as maybe entertain you a little bit with some of my experiences that have gone on throughout the industry over the last few decades. But in the big scheme of things, I'm trying to hopefully allow you all to learn and make the automotive experience, or when your car is having problems or maybe it's in for maintenance, a lot less stressful. You know, there are certain things like when a guy goes or a lady goes and buys a boat or a jet ski or gets custom wheels or gets a system or gets their window tinted, you're excited to pay them for that service. Very seldom are you excited to come to me that your car's not starting, it's making a noise it shouldn't, it's leaking something it shouldn't, you have a check engine light or a service light of some kind on the dash. That breeds a lot of stress and really the unknowing part of that. So as I kind of come to a conclusion about all we've talked about over the last half hour, it comes down to value. And so the folks that I continue, and I keep referencing over here to my cell phone, that continue to reach out to me, which I appreciate, they don't know what else to say other than, my car's doing this, what do you think it is and how much it is? And really my role as a professional technician is to hopefully articulate well that the most important and most valuable thing that I can provide to you out there is an accurate diagnosis and evaluation of your vehicle. In order to do that, I have to do some testing, as well as I learned early on in my career that you don't just fix, the one thing that's going on. For example, it comes in and it's leaking coolant, right? That's pretty clear. You need to have that coolant leak. But maybe we don't just look at the brakes while you're here or make sure the tires aren't going to blow out. I had 2 this week come in, unrelated items. The tires had cords showing so bad, it was a blowout waiting to happen. I call those will pops, not may pops. They will blow out on the side of the road in the most inopportune time. So they were not there for tires, and really because of the way cars are made and the fender well hugs the tires so well, a lot of times there's cords hanging out on the inside that you may not see as if you had an older vehicle where you were easy to see the tires. So we want to not only figure out why you're here, but we don't want to put any money into that except the testing time it costs to be right to give you a evaluation of the car, because I don't want to put a water pump on your car and you get halfway around the block and then you go metal to metal, grinding brakes, blow out a tire, get pulled over for a tail light or brake light out. These cars are anywhere on the low end now, 20,000 on up to 6 figures for a car, truck, van, SUV. That is a huge investment. And my goal, or our goal at A1 Custom Car Care, is for you to get as many years and miles dependably out of that vehicle as you can. Not only maybe do that, but when you do need to shift into another vehicle, there's still value on that first vehicle. I was talking to my sister, and I'll make this quick because we're running long today. She bought a car just before COVID hit, so she got a really good buy on it. She asked kind of what to buy. I'm like, hey, in those years, the Ford Fusion is a good car, so it's probably 2014 to 2018. The Ford Fusion in those years was really good. They did some stuff later with open cylinder head deck design. It really hadn't panned out for Ford on that deal. She got a good deal on the car. She had a car that had been paid off. I think she told me she drove it for 11 years. It still had value. I forget what she sold it for, but I'm going to say $4,000 to $5,000. She had another vehicle that we had bought broken. I put an engine in it for her, and I think I did maybe some basic electrical. I really didn't do a lot other than put an engine in it. I think she got $4,000 to $5,000 out of that car. So now you got a good deal on a brand new car. You had 2 cars that you had driven for 11 years and I think 2 or 3 years that you were able to get most or all of your money back out of those cars, put that right on this next car. And so she was able to pay off that brand new car, which she's still driving to this day, very low miles, within like 2 or 3 years because she was able to put so much equity of those prior 2 cars onto that. So the reality, in my opinion, when you buy a new car, you get that depreciation hit big time. Now, if you buy right, you hopefully mitigate that loss, but we all know the years of COVID were the only years you'd make money buying a car, which is crazy. But I offset that with my loved ones, my customers, my family, that they get to drive the vehicle hopefully for more years than most people, and there's value there on the back side that you can roll into the next car. So it's not just, hey, I made payments on it until I owned it. It's in such terrible shape then, so I'm getting rid of it. To me, that's just not how my brain works. My goal is to drive any vehicle at least 10 years. Now, I'm buying used vehicles typically that somebody else has already given up on, but 10 years on a new vehicle, that's really nothing anymore. 15 to 20 years really should be the only way that it would justify spending 50 grand. I'm just going to pick average on a vehicle. You need to get 10 to 15 years out of that in order to even make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you should just lease. Now, I'm not a lease guy, but that's what you're doing. If you're only making it to 7 years and 150,000 miles, and then the transmission, engine, something major happens, and you've got to trade that vehicle in and start over with payments again, that's a lease in my opinion. That's a long-term lease, but I digress on that. So I guess the moral of the story, excuse me, the moral of the story is the more proactive you can be on your car or things in life in general, it could be your body, it could be mental health, etc., the better off that's going to be. And I'm hoping to share some things with you with these podcasts that maybe make you think about things and you don't have to learn it the hard way, because I see it here at the service counter quite often. Had somebody known some of this information, they might have done things a little differently. So please feel free. If you think I shared some good information, let me know. If you think I shared some terrible information, I want to know that too. We'll see you next week. Thanks for hanging out at A1 Custom Car Cares Podcast.